Imagine you're standing in front of a door that hasn't been opened in 3,200 years. Not locked, sealed, with plaster and clay, pressed by a royal stamp nobody alive has ever seen. Every instinct in your body is screaming at you to push it open. That's exactly where archaeologist Howard Carter stood on November 26, 1922, in the Valley of the Kings. He held the candle up to a small crack in the door. His financial backer, Lord Carnarvon, asked him the question everyone's been asking about locked doors since the beginning of time. Can you see anything? Carter's answer became legend. Yes, wonderful things. Behind that door was the untouched tomb of Tutankhamun. And within months, people connected to the discovery started dying. The press called it the curse of the pharaohs. You've heard this one. Open a 3,000-year-old tomb, and something ancient wakes up to punish you. But here's the question nobody asks. If the tomb really killed everyone who touched it, why did the actual grave robbers, the ones who broke in and stole from Tutankhamun's body in ancient Egypt, walk away completely fine? Let's open the file. Here's the story you've probably heard, and it really did happen this way, mostly. Wait, hit subscribe and smash that like button before we continue. Lord Carnarvon, the wealthy Englishman funding the dig, cut himself shaving in Cairo in early 1923. A mosquito bite on his cheek, nicked open by the razor. Small thing. Except it got infected. Blood poisoning set in, then pneumonia. On April 5, 1923, less than 5 months after the tomb opened, Carnarvon died in a Cairo hotel room. And then come the details that made newspapers around the world lose their minds. At the exact moment he died, Cairo's power grid apparently went dark. The whole city blacked out for reasons no one could explain. Cairo's power grid, like most power grids in the 1920s, went dark occasionally for entirely mundane reasons. The infrastructure was unreliable, just doesn't read as well on the front page as the pharaoh did it. Back in England, Carnarvon's dog, a terrier named Susie, supposedly howled once and dropped dead in the same instant. Reporters dug up a supposed inscription warning that death shall come on swift wings to him who disturbs the peace of the king. And there's a reason this spread so fast. Carnarvon has sold exclusive tomb coverage to the Times of London, locking every other paper out of the real story. One rival reporter, Arthur Weigel of the Daily Mail, had every commercial reason to make the story bigger than the facts allowed. Howard Carter himself later wrote that he believed Weigel invented the curse purely out of spite. And it wasn't just tabloids chasing clicks. Arthur Conan Doyle, yes, the man who created Sherlock Holmes, told reporters in New York that Carnarvon's death was likely caused by an evil elemental placed in the tomb by ancient priests to guard it. The creator of the most famous rational detective in fiction went on record blaming a curse, and wire services ran his words worldwide. Over the next decade, more people connected to the excavation died. A radiologist who X-rayed the mummy, a secretary, a museum curator, novelist wrote about it. Movie studios made it worse. Boris Karloff put on bandages in 1932, and the mummy turned an archaeological dig into a horror movie forever. By the time the dust settled, the story wasn't an old man died of an infected bug bite. It was the pharaoh reached across 3,000 years and killed everyone who dared to look at his face. Let's start with the actual question you came here for. What about the real thieves? Tutankhamun's tomb wasn't untouched when Carter found it. Archaeologists found clear evidence that robbers broke in, not once, but at least twice, within just a few years of the original burial around 1323 BC. And these weren't distant strangers. Ancient Egyptian tomb robbery was often an inside job, carried out by workers who'd helped build and stock the tomb, or priests with direct access to the necropolis. They dug straight through the outer doors, rifled through jewelry boxes, stole small gold objects and precious oils that were easy to carry and resell, and left the place in visible disarray. Items scattered, some left half in and half out of chest, as if someone had grabbed what they could before getting spooked. Necropolis officials caught the disturbance, resealed the doors, and life went on. No plague, no blackout, no howling dog, just some very lucky, very anonymous thieves who walked out clean with the pharaoh's gold in their hands. So if disturbing Tutankhamun's rest really summoned divine punishment, the people who broke the royal seal with their bare hands should have been first in line. Instead, the curse apparently slept for 3,200 years, ignored every actual thief who ever touched that gold, and supposedly woke up the moment a British aristocrat nicked himself shaving. Maybe you're thinking, fair enough, ancient records are incomplete. Who really knows what happened to nameless thieves 3,000 years ago? So let's check someone whose fate we know in exact documented detail. In the 1930s, Egyptologist Herbert Winlock did something nobody else had bothered to do. He counted. Of the 58 people present at the opening of the tomb and the opening of the sarcophagus, only 8 died within the following 12 years. That's not an epidemic. That's just life expectancy in the 1920s and 30s, when the average person didn't even make it to 60. And here's a detail that should end the argument outright. Howard Carter, the man who found the tomb, who broke the seal with his own hands, who spent 10 years cataloging every object inside, who personally examined Tutankhamun's mummified remains during the 1925 autopsy, lived until 1939. 17 years after opening the tomb, he died at 64 of lymphoma, a disease that takes years to develop and has nothing to do with curses. If any single human on Earth should have been cursed, it was Carter, not some anonymous thief who touched the gold for an afternoon 3,000 years ago. The man who spent a decade with his hands inside that tomb, who unwrapped the king's own body. The pharaoh, apparently, let him live almost 2 more decades. Meanwhile, Lord Carnarvon, the man everyone remembers as the first victim, had been in fragile health for over 15 years before he ever set foot in Egypt. A car accident in Germany back in 1901 left his lungs permanently damaged. He traveled to Egypt's dry climate, specifically because doctors told him it was better for his weak respiratory system. He wasn't a healthy man struck down by ancient magic. He was already the most likely person in that room to die from an infection. And here's the detail that undoes the entire legend at the root. That cursed inscription, "Death shall come on swift wings," never existed. Howard Carter, who was there, who read the actual walls with his own eyes, denied it outright. No archaeologist ever recorded it. Remember those rival papers, locked out of the Times exclusive deal? One of them published a photograph of a real inscribed shrine from the tomb, alongside a translation that was simply invented. The actual hieroglyphs were spells from the Book of the Dead, texts meant to guarantee the dead king's eternal life, not to threaten the living. Nobody fact-checked the fake translation because it was 1923 and it sold papers. So it's not just that the curse has holes. There was no curse text to begin with. Someone printed an invented sentence as if it were an ancient translation, and 100 years later, people still repeat it as historical fact. Scientists have also floated one real, non-supernatural culprit for the deaths that did happen. Sealed tombs can trap mold spores for millennia, including Aspergillus flavus, a fungus that can cause serious lung infections in people with weakened immune systems. It's a documented phenomenon at other ancient burial sites, but even that theory has a hole. Most people who entered the tomb, including Carter, never got sick from it, which leaves the simplest explanation standing. A novelist named Marie Corelli publicly warned right before the tomb opened that dire punishment awaited anyone who violated a sealed Egyptian tomb, and reporters loved quoting her every time anyone connected to the dig so much as caught a cold. Every explainable death got filed under the curse. Every survivor, including the man who spent more time with Tutankhamun's remains than anyone alive, got quietly ignored because archaeologists lives a normal, long life, doesn't sell papers. So here's what actually happened. Nobody was cursed. A newspaper invented a warning that was never written, quoted a dying novelist for drama, and buried the fact that the person most exposed to the curse simply didn't die. The tomb never killed anyone. The story did. But sit with that for a second because it's actually the creepier version. For 100 years, millions of people were genuinely afraid of a sentence that no one ever carved into any wall, in any tomb, anywhere. A fear that's specific, that widespread, that durable, and it came from nothing. No ancient king, no magic, just a few confident sentences in a 1923 newspaper that nobody bothered to check. So maybe the real question isn't whether Tutankhamun cursed anyone. It's this: what else are you currently afraid of that started exactly the same way? One confident sentence, never verified, repeated until it felt like history. File closed on Tutankhamun. Next time, we open a file on an image you've seen 1,000 times. Fierce Viking warriors charging into battle, wearing horns on their helmets. Except historians have never found a single real Viking helmet with horns on it. Not one. So where did that image actually come from? That's next on Glitch Files. History has glitches. We find them,